Did you know over 1.3 million Australians are at risk of losing their homes by 2026? That's not a prediction. It's a warning from economists and housing experts who say we're heading straight into a full-blown housing disaster. Mortgage stress is rising, rents are exploding, and families are already being forced out of their homes across the country. What's coming next might be even worse. In just a few months, hundreds of thousands of Australians will hit what's being called a mortgage cliff, where fixed-rate home loans suddenly skyrocket. And that's just one of many ticking time bombs. Add natural disasters, investor greed, and a rental market spiraling out of control, and you've got the perfect storm. So, how did we get here? And more importantly, is your home at risk too? Stay with me as we break down 10 shocking reasons why millions could be forced out of their homes in 2026. You might not like what you hear, but you need to know. Number 1, rising interest rates. Over the past 2 years, interest rates in Australia have climbed at their fastest pace in a generation. What started as small, manageable increases by the Reserve Bank quickly turned into a series of aggressive hikes aimed at controlling inflation. But the real cost? Millions of Australians are now paying hundreds, sometimes thousands more each month on their mortgages. In some cases, monthly repayments have jumped by over 60%, placing families under extreme financial pressure. What once felt like a safe investment, a home, has become a financial trap for many. For homeowners on variable loans, each rate hike feels like a punch to the gut. Even a small 0.25% increase can add hundreds of dollars to repayments. And with inflation still lingering and global markets uncertain, more hikes could still be on the horizon. Households that were just getting by are now dipping into savings, racking up credit card debt, or missing bills just to keep the roof over their heads. And renters aren't safe either. Many landlords are passing on the extra costs by jacking up rent prices. The bigger picture is terrifying. As more families default or fall behind, banks will tighten lending, foreclosures will rise, and the housing market could tip into chaos. We're not just talking about individual struggles. We're talking about a nationwide housing shock. And unless rates drop significantly, which many experts say is unlikely anytime soon, this crisis will only deepen in 2026. It's not just numbers on a chart, it's real people, real homes, and real lives at risk. Number 2, the mortgage cliff of 2026. In 2026, hundreds of thousands of Australian homeowners will face what economists are calling the mortgage cliff. During the low interest rate period of 2020 to 2022, many buyers locked in ultra-cheap fixed-rate home loans. But those fixed terms are now coming to an end. When they expire, borrowers will be thrown onto much higher variable rates, often jumping from 2% to over 6% overnight. For many families, that will mean thousands more in monthly repayments they simply cannot afford. This isn't just about bad timing. It's a structural issue that's been building quietly for years. Over 800,000 fixed-rate loans are set to expire within a short window, creating a mass shockwave across the housing market. Most of these borrowers planned their budgets around low repayments and have never experienced interest rate volatility before. Suddenly, the financial rug is pulled from under them, and there's no safety net. Some will try to refinance, only to be rejected due to tighter lending rules. Others will be forced to sell or face repossession. The danger here is that this cliff won't just affect individuals, it will ripple across the economy. As more households default, housing prices could drop, pushing recent buyers into negative equity, where their homes are worth less than their loans. Confidence in the market could collapse. And worst of all, many of the people falling off this cliff did nothing wrong. They followed the rules, bought modest homes, and paid on time. But in 2026, that might not be enough to keep their homes. The question isn't if the mortgage cliff will cause damage. It's how severe and widespread the impact will be. And if we're not prepared, the fallout could be devastating. Number 3, wages aren't keeping up. While the cost of housing has exploded in recent years, wages in Australia have remained almost frozen. In real terms, many Australians are earning less today than they were 5 years ago, once inflation is factored in. This means even though people might be working longer hours or juggling multiple jobs, their paychecks no longer stretch far enough to cover essentials, let alone soaring mortgage or rent payments. For an increasing number of households, housing costs are now consuming over 40% of their income, officially placing them in housing stress. This growing gap between income and expenses is pushing the middle class to the brink. People who used to feel financially secure, teachers, nurses, tradies, even small business owners, are now struggling to stay afloat. Savings accounts are being drained, credit card debt is rising, and many are skipping meals or medical appointments just to keep up with bills. And for renters, the problem is even worse. With rents climbing and wages stagnant, there's simply no room to breathe financially. The psychological toll is just as real as the financial one. Living paycheck to paycheck, knowing that one unexpected expense, a car repair, a medical bill, a rent increase, could leave you homeless, creates a constant state of anxiety. And with no meaningful wage growth expected in the near future, this pressure is only set to intensify. When housing becomes unaffordable for working people, it's not just a personal crisis, it's a system failure. Millions of Australians are being left behind, not because they're reckless, but because the system is broken. And unless wages start rising in step with the cost of living, more and more families will be pushed out of their homes in 2026. Number 4. Housing shortage and population growth. Australia is in the middle of a housing supply crisis, and it's getting worse. While the population continues to grow rapidly, especially due to record levels of overseas migration, the construction of new homes has slowed to a crawl. Experts estimate that by 2026, Australia will face a shortfall of over 200,000 homes, leaving tens of thousands of people without access to stable housing. Building approvals have dropped significantly, and delays caused by labor shortages, rising material costs, and strict planning regulations are making it nearly impossible to meet the growing demand. At the same time, Australia welcomed more than 500,000 new migrants in the last year alone. These numbers are expected to stay high in coming years as businesses and universities rely on skilled workers and international students. While migration brings many benefits to the economy, the country simply isn't building homes fast enough to keep up. The result? Rents surge, competition for housing intensifies, and vulnerable groups like low-income families and young people are pushed further out of the market. The consequences of this imbalance are already being felt in every major city. Vacancy rates are at record lows, and rental queues stretch around the block. People are being forced to live in overcrowded conditions, sleep in cars, or move far away from work and school just to find shelter. And this is just the beginning. If current trends continue, the pressure on Australia's housing system will reach breaking point by 2026. Without bold action to increase supply through zoning reform, fast-tracking approvals, and investing in affordable housing, the shortage will only grow. And when there aren't enough homes to go around, millions will be left behind, locked out of the housing market entirely. Number 5. Investor takeover and short-term rentals. Over the past decade, the Australian property market has become a playground for investors, many of whom treat housing as a financial asset rather than a basic human need. Increasingly, properties are being snapped up not by families looking for a home, but by investors aiming to profit, either through capital gains or short-term rental platforms like Airbnb. In some suburbs, particularly in popular tourist destinations and inner-city areas, there are now more homes listed on Airbnb than are available for long-term rent. This shift has drastically reduced the number of rental properties available to everyday Australians. The impact is clear. As long-term rental stock disappears, competition skyrockets, and landlords gain more power to raise rents or evict tenants without much notice. Families looking for a stable home are now competing with holidaymakers for the same properties. Entire apartment buildings are being converted into short-stay rentals, and in some regional towns, locals are being forced to leave the communities they grew up in because they simply can't find a place to live. Investors, driven by profit, have little incentive to prioritize housing stability over short-term gain. Governments have been slow to act. While some states have introduced limited regulations on short-term rentals, loopholes remain and enforcement is weak. Meanwhile, tax incentives like negative gearing and capital gains discounts continue to favor property investors over first home buyers. This imbalance has created a system where housing is less about shelter and more about speculation. If left unchecked, investor dominance and the rise of short-term rentals will continue to erode the availability of affordable homes, pushing more Australians to the edge. By 2026, unless significant policy changes are made, the investor takeover could leave entire generations locked out of the housing market for good. If this is hitting close to home, we want to hear from you. Have rising rents or investor takeovers affected your area? Drop your story in the comments below. And hey, if you value deep researched content like this, please subscribe. It's just one click, but it fuels everything we do. Number 6. Natural disasters and insurance crisis. In recent years, Australia has seen a sharp rise in natural disasters, from devastating bushfires to catastrophic floods. Climate scientists warn that these extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and more intense, and the consequences for homeowners are severe. Thousands of properties in flood-prone or fire-prone areas are now considered high-risk zones, and for many, that means one thing: insurance is either completely unaffordable or not available at all. Without insurance, homeowners are left vulnerable, unable to protect the very thing they've worked their whole lives for. The financial toll is staggering. In towns like Lismore, floods have left entire neighborhoods uninhabitable, with families either abandoning their homes or struggling to rebuild without support. Some residents report insurance premiums tripling or being denied coverage altogether. This growing insurance crisis is creating a dangerous domino effect. Uninsured homes can't be sold, can't be mortgaged, and often can't be rebuilt. For many, it means living in a damaged home or walking away with nothing. And with the number of high-risk zones expected to rise by 2026, the problem is only going to get worse. The harsh reality is this: even if you own your home outright, you're not safe if nature strikes and no one will insure you. Climate change is reshaping not just our environment, but the entire housing landscape. Areas once considered prime real estate are now turning into disaster zones, and governments are struggling to keep up. Without urgent action to improve climate resilience, expand insurance access, and support at-risk communities, millions of Australians could find themselves homeless, not because of financial failure, but because of a broken climate and an unprepared system. In 2026, nature may become one of the most ruthless forces pushing people out of their homes. Number 7. Homelessness is rising fast. Homelessness in Australia is no longer a distant issue affecting only the most vulnerable. It's becoming a mainstream crisis. According to the latest census data, homelessness has surged by over 9% in just 5 years, with more than 122,000 people now without a safe or stable place to live. But these numbers don't tell the full story. There's a hidden layer of homelessness: families couch surfing, young people sleeping in cars, and elderly Australians living in overcrowded or unsafe housing. As rent prices soar and home ownership slips further out of reach, more people are being pushed into precarious living situations. This isn't just happening in big cities. Regional towns, once seen as affordable alternatives, are now also under pressure. With fewer rental properties available and no significant investment in social or affordable housing, people who lose their homes have nowhere to turn. Shelters and crisis services are overwhelmed, with many turning people away due to lack of space. The cost of living crisis is compounding the problem. Families who never imagined themselves in poverty are now relying on charities for food, rent assistance, and emergency accommodation. What's most alarming is how fast this trend is accelerating. If current economic pressures continue unchecked, experts warn that homelessness could rise by another 20 to 30% by 2026. That would mean tens of thousands more Australians without a roof over their heads, not because of bad choices, but because the system failed them. We're not talking about a few isolated cases. We're talking about a nation where owning or even renting a home is becoming a luxury. And unless urgent action is taken, homelessness may become the defining social crisis of the next decade, one that affects not just the poorest, but anyone caught in the widening cracks of Australia's broken housing system. Number 8. Soaring rents and evictions. Australia's rental market is in a state of emergency. In major cities like Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne, rents have surged by over 25% in just the past year. And there's no sign of relief ahead. Even regional areas, once considered affordable, are now seeing record-high rental prices. For many families, this means cutting back on essentials just to keep a roof over their heads. And for those already on tight budgets, the rising cost of rent is simply unsustainable. When rent goes up and wages don't, eviction becomes almost inevitable. The situation is made worse by Australia's weak tenancy laws. In many states, landlords can issue no-grounds evictions, forcing renters to leave without having done anything wrong. This legal loophole gives landlords too much power, especially in a market where finding a new place is nearly impossible. Rental inspections now attract dozens of desperate applicants, many offering to pay well above the asking price just to secure a lease. Families are being displaced, students are sleeping in cars, and workers are traveling hours each day because they've been priced out of their own communities. By 2026, experts predict rental affordability will reach crisis levels nationwide. Without stronger protections for tenants, more people will be pushed into homelessness, not because they refuse to pay, but because they simply can't keep up. And as eviction rates rise, so does instability for children, mental health strain, and the breakdown of community ties. This is not just a housing issue, it's a human issue. If nothing changes, renters will continue to bear the brunt of Australia's housing disaster, and the dream of a secure, stable home will slip further out of reach for millions. Number 9. Policy failures and broken promises. One of the most frustrating parts of Australia's housing crisis is that it didn't have to get this bad. For years, governments at both state and federal levels have promised bold action, more affordable housing, better protections for renters, and support for first home buyers. But time and again, those promises have either fallen short or been quietly abandoned. Housing targets are missed, funding is delayed, and key reforms are watered down under pressure from powerful interest groups. The result? A growing sense of betrayal from everyday Australians who trusted that help was on the way. Take affordable housing developments, for example. Despite being announced with fanfare, many of these projects are stuck in planning bottlenecks, underfunded, or never built at all. Meanwhile, tax policies like negative gearing and capital gains concessions continue to benefit wealthy investors over average families trying to buy their first home. Instead of leveling the playing field, policy decisions have often tilted it further, driving up prices, reducing supply, and locking out low- and middle-income Australians. What makes this especially dangerous is the loss of public trust. People are no longer confident that governments will protect their housing rights or take the crisis seriously. In the absence of real leadership, communities are left to fend for themselves, while the system continues to favor those with money and influence. As we head into 2026, without bold structural reform, not just Band-Aid fixes, millions of Australians will continue to fall through the cracks. Housing is not just an economic issue. It's about dignity, security, and opportunity. And right now, policy failure is one of the biggest reasons so many Australians are at risk of losing their homes. Number 10. The growing wealth divide. Australia's housing crisis isn't just about supply and demand, it's also about inequality. Over the last 2 decades, wealth has become increasingly concentrated in the hands of older, asset-rich Australians, while younger generations are being locked out of homeownership entirely. Baby boomers and Gen Xers who bought property years ago have watched their assets skyrocket in value, while millennials and Gen Z are left facing record prices, stricter lending rules, and skyrocketing rents. The dream of owning a home, once considered a basic goal, is now out of reach for many, no matter how hard they work or save. This divide is creating a two-tier society, those who own property and those who likely never will. First home buyers now need to save for 10 to 15 years just for a deposit, all while paying high rents that make it almost impossible to build savings. Some are forced to rely on parental help, deepening the gap between families with generational wealth and those without. Meanwhile, older Australians continue to benefit from generous tax breaks and rising property values, often owning multiple homes while younger people struggle to secure even one. The consequences go far beyond personal frustration. This widening wealth gap is fueling intergenerational resentment, weakening social cohesion, and putting long-term pressure on everything from retirement systems to mental health services. It's also affecting fertility rates, delaying family formation, and reducing economic mobility. If nothing changes, we are on track to become a country where owning a home is a privilege reserved for the wealthy few. By 2026, unless serious action is taken to rebalance the system, the wealth divide will become a housing divide, and millions will be left on the wrong side of it. By now, it should be clear. Australia is heading toward a housing disaster, and it's not just about rising prices or interest rates. It's about a system that's been slowly breaking down for years, leaving millions of people vulnerable. From the mortgage cliff and rental crisis to government inaction and the growing wealth gap, the warning signs are all around us. And if we don't start addressing them now, 2026 could mark the moment when the great Australian dream truly collapses for good. But this isn't just doom and gloom. It's a wake-up call, because the future isn't written yet. Change is possible, but only if we start demanding it. Whether you're a homeowner, renter, student, or parent, this crisis affects us all, and the first step toward fixing it is being informed and speaking out. Don't ignore the signs, start asking questions, challenge your leaders, talk to your community, because staying silent now could mean losing a lot more than just a home later. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Are you already feeling the pressure? Have you seen this crisis play out in your own life or community? Drop a comment below and join the conversation. Your voice matters. And if you found this video valuable, please support our work by hitting that subscribe button. It's just one click, but it means the world to us. We pour hours of research, writing, and editing into every video to bring you the full picture. So give us a like, share it with someone who needs to see it, and help us keep shining a light on the issues that matter.